Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. My name is Dino Ray Ramos. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and you are watching the WarnerMediaAccess Pathways for Inclusive Storytelling panel. This is going to be a great panel. For those who don't know me, my name is Dino, like I said before, and I am the founder of Diaspora. I am wearing a polka dot shirt, a nice little polka dot shirt with a nice background of this abstract painting. I just want to let you know that. But before we go into the conversation, I want to go around the panel so they could introduce themselves. We're going to start with Grace Moss, then go to Hao Zheng, and then we're going to go to Vinita Mehta, and then end with Richard Nguyen. So take it away, Grace.
Thank you, Dino. Hi, everybody. My name is Grace Moss, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a Filipino-American with wavy black hair, a red and blue and green blouse, and I've got some artwork behind me. I'm joining you from the land of Tongva, and I am the VP of Equity Inclusion at WarnerMedia and help oversee all of our pipeline programs for creative talent. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hao Zheng. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm actually wearing a Journey to the West shirt, and I'm in Beijing right now. I'm a part of the HBO Access directing program as a directing fellow.
Hi, I'm Vinita Mehta. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm wearing my lucky Ann Taylor black cotton tops. Good things happen when I wear this top. And I'm here with you from Anacostan land, also known as Washington, D.C. I am in my home office, and so my background is actually, I'm a trained clinical psychologist. So this is actually that's my day job. And so you would be seeing what my patients see when they work with me. And I'm together with Richard, we're a writing team. And so we are part of the WarnerMediaAccess Writers Program.
Really well said, Vinita. My name is Richard Nguyen. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I am also coming to you from my home office. I am a born aristocrat, as this suggests. I'm kidding, in case that wasn't clear. But what I'm Vietnamese American. I inherited my father's flat nose, as you can see, and wearing a Henley, although it looks like an obnoxious V-neck from here. I swear, I'm not that obnoxious. But also joining to you from Tongva land.
Thanks, y'all. I'm really excited about this conversation. And I also am coming from Tongva land, and I'm Filipino American. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, at the top of this, but I just want to get that out there. But yes, like I said, I'm very excited about this conversation just because it's going to be a conversation about breaking into the TV industry through the lens of the fellowship programs. And this is like firsthand experience. And we also have Grace here who like helps oversee all of this. So I'm just excited to just talk about this and to hear the experiences of the fellows. First off, I just wanted to ask for like Richard, Vinita, and Hao, what was it that attracted you, like in the very beginning, that attracted you to these your respective programs? And what was it kind of like lit the fire underneath you to be like, oh, okay, I need to get into this program. Richard, we can start with you and then go to Vinita and then Hao.
Yeah, so Vinita and I know writers in the industry who are a little bit ahead of us and in terms of getting staffing and all these positions. And so when we think about, okay, how do I get there? And we ask them all their experiences and the things that they've done to get to where they've, all that they've accomplished. The common thread have been things like the Cape Fellowship. And back then it was the HBO Access Writers Program. And so I think that's just a common thing that you want to do as someone, especially trying to break in, and there aren't many people who look like you, who talk like you. Find those few maybe, and then see where those channels that they broke in, and see if you can kind of like open up that channel for yourself just as much. And so kind of reverse engineering that for yourself and being like, okay, these are programs that would stick by you and actually support you, and not just sort of like, I guess, use your name and whatnot. But I'll let Vinita kind of expand on that.
Yeah, I would say that what was so encouraging as we talked to writers who were a few steps ahead of us, and wanting to be where they are, is that we were so encouraged to hear that these programs truly were safe spaces, to share our personal experiences, to talk about our personal stories and develop our personal stories, how to convey them to people. And so that, I think that was just so encouraging, first to hear as applicants and then to experience as actual participants in the program, that these were really wonderful places to develop ourselves as professional writers and to develop our craft.
And how, in terms of your directing route, what attracted you to this program or your program?
Right. I mean, very similar to, what Richard and Vinita was saying. Like joining, like becoming part of the TV program is definitely one of, like my biggest dreams. Like when I every time I come back to China and visit my family and talk with my friends, very, very interestingly, like one common story that we all share is that we're watching a lot of TV shows. Even like I can speak to my friends about the US TV shows. It's, everyone knows, like everyone have watched Game of Thrones, Succession, like, so for me, becoming part of that creative force, it definitely, like brings me a lot of passion. And another thing though is that, when we learn filmmaking and learn directing at school, we never really learned like the TV part, like we were learning about film, we're learning about, camera, about like the cinematic film language, but we're never learning how does the TV world work. And so, joining this type of programs definitely will teach us that.
Yeah, and Grace, being, helping oversee this program, I know there really isn't, it's a great way to start to apply, and, it's a pipeline program, but are there some tips, I mean, there's no perfect way, but like, for those people who are interested, are there tips for, who are interested in applying, and what, there isn't a magic spell to just to make it, but like, what can you tell people who are interested in these programs?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, first off, I would say to apply to all of them as often as you can. I think as I come across, new writers and directors, they often don't even know about many of these programs. And whether it's at WarnerMedia or Disney or through an org like CAPE, we all have the common objective of wanting to advocate and help support these new voices, and maybe not new to the craft, but new to, the programming teams who may not know them. And so I think definitely doing the research as far as all the various opportunities, because there are some that are very broad, there are some too specific to community and identity. And on top of that, again, making sure that you don't just apply once, because they are very competitive. There are very few spots available. And I know writers who have applied. When I was at NBC doing this, they applied, for 4 or 5 years and finally got in. And we are really tracking the progress of the applicants. And if we see that scores have improved over time, we, give you another look. So I think that's first and foremost. Second thing I would say is, don't sleep on the essay portion. I imagine all of these programs have an essay component, which I also think is similar to the interview process for these programs. I've, again, come across talent who seem to be very focused on like the resume and their MFA and like, this particular job, which is fantastic and very important. When we get to that stage of getting to meet them in the room, or when we're looking at their essay, like the talent's there. We just want to know what your personal story is. And that is really, really, really key to us. We want to see that you have something to say. You're not just writing, a procedural or workplace comedy because it's what you think will get you staffed or get you an episode. And we also want to understand that very unique POV that you're bringing into your work and how that translates into the stories that you're telling either on the page or on camera. And then I think the last thing I would say is to just do your research on the programs themselves. We are all very different, and some have maybe a little bit more focus on the writing, some have more focus on professional development. So think about what you need to grow and what will help advance your career, and then really work to pinpoint those programs that will focus on that, because they're also different. They're all great, but we all do things a little bit differently. So those are some of the things that I would recommend.
Following up on that, you've been in the DEI space with other networks before. Have you, like during your career, with these pipeline programs specifically, have you seen kind of the numbers increase in terms of like diverse voices who are coming out of the woodwork, I think you would say, or have you seen just like how has the journey been or the trajectory been in terms of like when you kind of first started in this space to now? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, when I first started in this space, it was probably like 2013 when I was at NBC. And I would say that just statistically speaking, across the industry, not just at this particular network, the writers of color across all levels were low. And I think at this point, where we are now several years later, I do see an increase in writers of color at the lower level. I think now there's a bottleneck of getting that talent to those upper levels, to the showrunner levels. And we all know that if you have more diverse representation at those higher levels, then they will be more likely to also bring up writers of color into their rooms. And so we're just at that bottleneck phase, and we're trying to see how we can try to widen that so that we can get more diverse writers at the mid to upper level as well. And we're actually developing a program in that space for mid-level writers, which is still very early in its development, but we are constantly thinking of how can we adjust that, because I think there is a great amount of talent at the staff writer and story editor level. So we want to think ahead of that and how can we prepare a path for those who can now advance into that level.
Yeah, I think that the bottleneck metaphor you use is kind of like the perfect, I think that's where we are as an industry as a whole in terms of the diversity inclusion, just because, yes, people are getting at the ground level, but who are making the decisions? Are there any inclusive voices making decisions right now? So I'm so glad you said that it's still a journey. It's a long journey, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
For Richard, Vinita, and Hao, you guys are obviously storytellers, and when you first entered the program, and like as you went on your own, journey there, did you see your perspective shift in terms of what kind of storyteller you wanted to be, like what kind of stories you wanted to tell? In other words, did you go in saying, I'm gonna be this great sci-fi genius, and then you came out saying, oh God, I'm gonna be this rom-com person? Like, how has your journey as a creative, during these programs, how has it changed? How has it stayed the same? How, we could start with you.
I think instead of changing my perspective or the kind of stories that I want to tell, it really confirms and gives me confidence in the type of stories that I want to tell. For example, because of my background, I've been always moving, right? Like I've in China, in different cities, and then when I first came to the US when I was 15, I was in New York, and then moved to LA. I was always traveling, and so that's why I just don't know when people ask me where you're from. It's a very hard question for me to answer that. So like that's why all of the films that I make or all the stories that I tell are with that theme of finding belonging, finding a place for yourself, finding your own identity. And that before this type of programs and I would say like a couple years ago, I didn't even see, how people in Hollywood really care about, really care about listening to, diverse voice, listening to other people's voice. But then, when I actually entered these programs, I felt the support that, you can actually tell your own story, and that's something, people will listen to, so I would say this program's confirmed.
Nice. And with Richard and Vinita, you're a writing team, right? You're a writing duo. So I would think that kind of your story would be kind of different. Did you guys enter in the program as a writing team? Forgive me if I, and like, how did it, like with two voices, I would imagine it's a little bit, I don't want to say challenging, but you guys have to talk it out. You have to hash it out, but like, how has the program shifted or bolstered or just kind of change your perspective in terms of storytelling and your method and what you wanted to do?
I think that similar to how I think it really just confirmed and clarified for us the kinds of writers that we are together. That we love soapy dramas with very broken people, but I think that I'm going to ask Richard to chime in here, but I'll just kind of say the overview, which is that Richard and I are both the children of immigrants who experienced, who really left their homelands because of war. In my case, it was my parents' partition of India. In Richard's case, the Vietnam War. And so we've talked a lot. I mean, we've learned so much about each other. We've been a writing team for 4 years now. And we met actually in Washington, D.C. And I think that, these programs have really clarified and confirmed for us the kinds of storytellers that we are, and really leveraging our common background and our need to really kind of work through intergenerational trauma through our stories.
Yes, trauma. We love trauma. Sorry, Richard, go on.
It's just add on to, and maybe put in different words. I might be repeating exactly what she said, but it's just as much of a journey about, like, it didn't change the stories we told, but made us get much clearer on the storytellers we are and archers that we bring to that page. That's just as important. And I think starting all the way back from Cape and leading up to WarnerMedia, hitting on that personal story, even those 2-3 minutes, condensing it down, it's like, what really is it that's binding you to? And I think we need to put it really well. That common theme in trauma, it was always there maybe in our past samples, but now, like, that we know it better and we feel so much strongly about it, and that this is what really kind of synergizes us as a voice. I think that just comes through in the samples a lot clearer. And I think that goes for any writer who, it's probably going to be just as much like, okay, the craft, the kind of stories, quote unquote, like what templates they fit in, but you're working just as much on yourself, self-therapy or whatever, to be able to bring that voice to the next level.
I think, from what y'all have told me, it's like, it's very much, you went in, it's clear that y'all were talented because you got into the program, but in a way, maybe it was a little bit raw, and then you kind of honed your craft as you went on this journey and, became a better writer, a better storyteller. And, I loved how you guys said it kind of confirmed, your experiences and your talent as a storyteller. But at the same time, every time we go into a new space or kind of go into some sort of master class, which I'm taking some master classes right now, you kind of learn something about yourself that you never thought you would. I'll leave this up, whoever wants to answer first. I'm not going to call on anyone, but during this program, was there anything, or your respective programs, was there something that unexpected that you discovered about yourself that you were like, I never thought that was in me?
I think one thing, it's, well, not really about like myself, but then like one thing that is very unexpected was, I mean, honestly speaking, before, I applied to this program and entered the program, my goal is to really, use this opportunity to break into the TV world, right? And I was thinking about my own career, but then when you join this type of programs, you have other fellows there. And that's something that I never thought that, we will become so close. Every week we will have like happy hours and like we have brain trusts. And even now, the program already ended, we're still texting each other, reading each other's scripts, watching each other's like directing reels and giving notes to each other. And that to me felt, really, that I'm not really alone, even though each of us have different voices, but together we're all really listening and patiently like giving each other space. And that was something that I wasn't expecting before I applied.
Nice. So it's like finding your community, finding your people in a way,
right.
Vinita and Richard, you want to chime in, add anything on?
I was so surprised that people really wanted to hear the traumas and the difficulties, really wanted to hear your authentic self in full. I would say, and I think what was so surprising to me about that is, I'm coming from psychology, although I spent 10 years in news and docs, so I've been on a different side of the TV business. But even within the world of psychology, you kind of have to be a little bit guarded in a funny way. And I think what surprised me so much, similar again to what Hao just said about the ways that you could be so open and really bare yourself to your cohort. That was a really wonderful surprise.
Oh, and Richard, you want to add?
Yeah, I would agree. In my experience, it was first and foremost humility, in that we, especially as writers, we're so confined to our spaces at our desks. We think like the world revolves around us at a certain point. And to some extent, that should be the case. Like the world revolves around your script because you got to pump this out by the deadline, right? But joining this cohort and realizing, wow, there are depths that I am not even like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like these people, and they're coming with such a self-awareness, and they're willing and able to share it. It just like, it challenges me, it excites me to do just something similar. Like, have I even gone to the depths that I could have gone to for myself? That's the sensation I get from being surrounded by a cohort like that.
I think one of the interesting things here is that I love how everyone is starting to tell their stories, and this program allows us to do that. And it's kind of funny, and I want to be honest, a little bit infuriating about how like we're just happy that we get to tell our stories. It's like, oh, that shouldn't, just because we come from different backgrounds, that isn't how it should be. But I love how we can tell our stories, but at the same time, I'm just like, we're like celebrating the fact that we could be ourselves. And it's kind of like, it's Hollywood, let's just say that. But Grace, as this program grows and as things hopefully get more inclusive and more diverse, and maybe we won't need these pipeline programs anymore in this way, but how do you think it will change, if it will change at all?
Yeah, great question. I think like ultimately, like you said, at the end of the day, in success, we won't, like our department won't exist because we have great representation, wonderful stories being told from all levels and all types of, depictions of characters that are multifaceted, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't feel like that's going to be happening anytime soon. So there's certainly, like you said, a lot of work to be done. I do think that the work in the pipeline space has certainly evolved. Again, I know when I first jumped in, several years ago, it was very, let's say, focused on, Black, Asian, and Latino talent. Very important, continuing to do that. And I think as we're learning more and expanding our own education about various communities, we are now, making sure we are inclusive of like trans, indigenous, Middle Eastern, North African, and disabled writers or writers with disability as well. And even in the panel introductions, I didn't start doing visual descriptions until maybe like 2 years ago. and having a land acknowledgement. That is it's fairly new to this space. And I'm glad that this is becoming more of a practice across multiple industries. And so that's certainly a change. And I think as far as the pipeline program specifically, you know, we are constantly, even when I was at my previous employer, we were constantly reevaluating each program. Like, okay, what is the new, not the new, but like, how are the needs and the issues evolving? You know, again, maybe now it's more having more showrunners of color. Maybe it's also looking at the unscripted space. And also, how are we not just creating a singular program, but how can we look at the follow-up after that? So once writers or directors are placed, that they're successful there, and can continue to grow and get more episodes or continue to get staffed on more series. So I think we're just constantly assessing and trying to expand the work, and also think about what hasn't been done and how can we do this work in a way that will be disruptive and not just sort of pedestrian, especially because a lot of these pipeline programs have been around for over a decade. So I think for us, it's really important that we're innovating and expanding the pool of talent that we're trying to service.
I think, yeah, I asked that question just because exactly like what you said, like even at the beginning of this, I'm not gonna lie, we're not used to saying our pronouns all the time. Well, I think a certain generation of us aren't, you know, showing my age, I guess, or, you know, describing what you're wearing or whatever. And it's like, it may feel uncomfortable, but we're not gonna lie because we're not used to it. And I think that's what it comes with learning. And I'm glad that you said all of that in terms of like evolving. And I love how the pipeline is evolving, and you know the people who are coming in are evolving. For Richard and Vinita and Hao, you know, going back to my earlier question about leveraging what you've learned, and you know now that you kind of have this arsenal of education, and you know, and like your skills are a little bit more honed, and you know what to expect when you enter in certain places. Like, how have you leveraged all of that into the quote unquote real world of Hollywood and the sea of sharks that are out there? And also, you know, how have you learned to protect yourself and protect your peace and protect, you know, your talent? Because there are a lot of people out there, especially now, that are looking to exploit diversity and exploit inclusivity and exploit these stories. Yeah, how have you leveraged everything you've learned into this real space, I guess you would say? Richard, we could start with you.
That is a big question. Maybe I can tackle one aspect of that. The thing that maybe goes unsaid a little bit, you know, Hollywood, everyone, all the gatekeepers, they're all very busy, overloaded people. Now they're saying, you know, people, it takes very slow to read. We're in one of those phases maybe. And in terms of leveraging what we've sort of like built and developed as a network through these programs, it really does help us put that foot in the door to get us on that top of the stack, and sort of in the sense like they don't have time to read every single thing they get that lands on their table, and so they really count on being people getting vetted, whether through a personal friend, which is why a lot of white people get, you know, opportunities, right? It's white people giving other white people opportunities, but this has been really a blessing for us to be sort of backed by organizations like CAPE and WarnerMedia to kind of be vetted by and be like, say, hey, like, read these people. They deserve a spot in their chance. I'll let Vinita kind of expand.
I mean, put another way, we're developing a network that it would have been so difficult to develop otherwise, that we really, you know, can have, you know, access to a layer that we wouldn't have been able to access. And, you know, one of the, I think, really great pieces of advice that we got along the way, this was from some people at CAPE, some guest speakers. You were asking, like, how do you kind of keep yourself centered? I'll take that aspect. Maybe it's appropriate as a psychologist too, that I take the how do you keep centered piece of things. But, you know, they said very honestly, you know, just have a life as well, you know, be able to balance, you know, to be able to balance your life, because it's just so important as a writer to just kind of keep your emotional center. So I think that we've also just, taken that to heart as well.
So for me, I think, being part of this program, I felt like I already know this people in the industry, and I have, like what Vinita was saying, that access, right? Like I have mentors who are actually, leading the team for these shows that I really, really love. And, like keeping that relationship and trying to find opportunities to even learn more, because I was in the program during the pandemic, right? So like a lot of productions were not really going on, but like one thing is to learn, like to learn from people by listening to their classes, but the other part is to actually practice those on set. So I'm right now looking forward to, do the next step and practice that. But very funny enough thing is that by becoming part of these programs, like, the HBO program in China, a lot of companies are coming to me for TV shows, and they're like, hey, we saw you like doing this, and are you interested in this? But it's very different world though, because in China, when you direct a TV show, let's say it's a 24 episode TV show, you actually direct every single episode as a director. So that was very fun, and I'm hoping that one day I will do that as well.
Oh, come on, 24 episodes. But okay, so like speaking to the topic of diversity, of course, especially in our communities, I think, well, first off, what I love hearing, there's this common thread here about community and about building community. And I think that's where it starts, granted that, I think that, it's all about strength in numbers. And I love how y'all are kind of just keeping in touch with your fellows and everything, and building this community instead of having this crab mentality of like, oh, I'm going to be the first, I'm going to, jump ahead and step over all these people who are my peers. And I love to hear that, to be just like from me, personally. But so like when in terms of diversity and inclusion in this industry, it is, for a lack of a better word, hot, trendy in Hollywood. It's a buzzword. Everyone is trying to get on that bandwagon. And as a result, I've heard some, I have friends who are filmmakers, who are writers, who are actors. And it's interesting to hear that when they talk to their agents or their managers, or they have people, talent from the dominant culture, translation, the white people, kind of their agents are telling them things like, oh, you can't get work right now because everything's about diversity. I just, I can't believe that, but I could believe someone is saying that, But what are your opinions about this kind of water cooler talk, I guess you would say, in terms of since it's like everything's about diversity now, why people can't get work, which is basically what we're hearing a lot of, through the scuttlebutt, as they say. I mean, even Grace, if you want to chime in first about this, since you kind of are leading the charge in terms of all these pipeline programs.
Absolutely. I think that's certainly something that I've heard before, especially more recently. And it's just very frustrating, and of course can be very maddening. These marginalized groups have been historically excluded, systematically, institutionally for generations. And now any move towards equity, all of a sudden, white folks are feeling oppressed. And that's clearly warped and not the case. I think the talent from these, underrepresented groups has always been there. And I think they're just now only able to get through these doors. So it's a very frustrating, notion. And I will say that all of our programs are open to anybody, straight, white guy, whoever. But we obviously are looking for folks who may not already have a voice in a room or on set, and we're trying to build room for them. So it's definitely very frustrating. And I think it's important that in at least in my purview, that we are making sure to collaborate and partner with the showrunners and the executives so that we can create something together versus us prescribing, some sort of initiative. And, we also think it's important to make sure that there's just a common language and understanding and education about all of these groups and the different issues and themes that, for example, as a woman of color that I've had to go through, so that they're also conscious of that as they're hiring and managing their staffs and their rooms and their sets. We certainly acknowledge that that's a belief that people have, and we're just trying to work with them to help them see another perspective.
Yeah. And as the talent, I guess you would say, I don't know if your peers, have told you this, or your white peers have told you this, that their agents are saying this, but what do y'all speak on? How do you feel about this issue in terms of oh, the diverse people are coming for our jobs? Sorry, that's horrible. But it's kind of what a lot of people are saying. How do you guys, what are your opinions about this? Vinita.
Well, I think that there's perception and then there's reality. And what's kind of confusing to me actually is that, in the 2040s, we're going to be a minority majority country. That is just the reality. America is becoming, people of color are going to be in the majority in a 20 to 25 years. So it's a bit confusing to say, that there shouldn't be more stories about people of color. There shouldn't be more writers of color, because this is just actually what society looks like. So, I guess I would even question, if we're going to say dominant culture, what do we really mean by that? Do we mean dominant in terms of numbers? Because if it's numbers, then that's really, it's just not as dominant as we perceive it to be. So it just seems to me to be that, the natural evolution of things, that, it has to change. The numbers are changing. And it's really, if you really looked at, who has the job versus how many people are being left out of it. So in other words, it's just not representative of who actually makes up America. Mm-hmm. So that's one way that I look at it. And, I just think that maybe we could be a little bit more fact-based around this, maybe it would help.
Cool. Vinita coming in with the facts. Facts are facts, guys. Richard, you have anything to add?
We all remember those days when, we try to pitch our story and then one white peer, whatever, well-intentioned and whatnot, we say hey, sorry, I don't think anyone wants to see an Asian story right now, dude. Could you try making your protagonist white? We've suffered that for years and years. And now all of a sudden the shoe's on the other foot. Now they're scared. It's everything needs to be, oh gosh, okay. And on that reality point, we're all competitive, we're all capitalists and whatnot. It's the society we live in, but it's that perception that it's a zero-sum game. And with all these announcements being made on deadline, I can see why white people are looking at that saying man, I never got a chance at that, or I never got read for that. It's well, it's kind of a reason why. It's do you have any authority to tell that story, or are you just kind of feeling left out? And it's a reality probably is that I don't think those white jobs are going anywhere. There's probably just as much jobs for you, but if you look at where the money's going, you look at where the business is expanding, more TV shows are being made, more, the conglomerates and writers' rooms are being concocted. So really, it's just a perception that all these additional jobs are going to people and not going to them. But really, you still got your friends in the industry. They'll still probably hire you at some point. Just, they're probably just, that in that water cooler talk, it's easy to kind of vent. And I understand that. But again, that reality versus perception kind of thing, mismatch going on.
Yeah. And how, how is it for you? Because I think you probably have a different perspective in terms of I'm assuming that you grew up seeing yourself well represented, but then you come to the States and you're wait a second, I'm the minority here. So how have, how do you navigate that space? I'm always interested to hear, I recently talked to an actress, I'm assuming she's Japanese, but she was born here in Palos Verdes, but then she moved back to Japan, and then she moved back here. And then so her identity is she's oh, I'm not Asian enough, but, I'm not American enough. But how is it for you to kind of navigate the field of representation, considering, your upbringing and how you saw yourself represented when you were younger.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was gonna talk about. So
sorry, I didn't mean to.
no worries. And like growing up, I always thought that I was in the dominant group in China, but then coming to the US, when I remember when I was first in the US in that high school in New York, I was one of the only 3 Chinese in that entire school. And that was the first time I was like, oh, wow, okay, so this is a new world. So I guess like experiencing both sides, I started to learn, I guess I started to be aware of, the fact that when you are in the dominant group, and you just think that's normal, right? And you're so used to growing up in that group and having all the advantages over the minority groups, you think that's just normal, and you never even question or think for the other people. But then, like what Vinita is saying, that even based on just stats, like how big are the population of this minority groups, like disabled people, LGBT people in China, let's say that, and you pretend that you don't see them and you don't know them, but they exist, and there are big numbers, so I guess right now I just felt like from in the US, I just felt like from the dominant culture, they're probably having the similar thing like what I was experiencing, right? Like they're so used to that quote unquote normal life. But then I think we need time, and that's what we're doing right now, like to educate everyone. And this process of having more diverse voices heard is definitely going to help that.
That was like a perfect answer. You answered the question correctly, so you win on the show. I just think going to what you just said about the quote hard quote dominant culture. Someone once told me, we were talking about the same exact topic about how diverse and inclusive talent and storytelling is very much evolving, but people won't, like the white community will not, or white people, dominant culture, whatever, refuse to kind of give up that space because they're scared they won't be favored anymore. And I don't think that's the case. And I think one of the things is it's like, we're just trying to level the playing field. We're not trying to take away anything. We're trying to add, right? So that's why I think programs like this and talent like y'all, it will kind of hope, change that. And you guys are building these communities, and I think we're doing it, even just by talking about it. Hopefully people will listen and enact upon it. But you never know, COVID, but anyways, but yeah. So like we're running out of time here, but I do want to ask, I want to ask Grace specifically, for those who aren't necessarily looking to be, directors or writers, but there's so many things to do in Hollywood. But how do you think they can take their experiences and apply them to what they want to do in this business, if they don't want to be writers or directors or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are really trying to create a comprehensive landscape of different programs. Obviously, writers and directors are key and very important in that. But we are exploring where are the other gaps across the industry. We actually just launched earlier this summer an unscripted initiative with HBO Max. We are also launching, also in partnership with HBO Max, an animation program. We've been working with HBO on a virtual production program in the UK, as well as programs in Canada. We have a whole team for our Canadian attendees, for a whole team in Canada who are also creating their own programs for writers, directors, creative talent. We are looking at programs, for those who want to be in the comedy space, whether it's talk and variety. We did a program for stand-ups last year, and we're exploring that again. So we are really trying to run the gamut of opportunities. And of course, maintain everything that we're doing for writers and directors, but see how we can expand these efforts, because not everybody may want to be a writer or director. We're looking at composers and line producers and the post-production space. So these are things that we're hoping to evolve and develop over the next year or so that we can make sure that we are penetrating multiple areas of the business as well.
And I think that's important to note that, it is important to have inclusivity across the board, below the line, in front of the camera, behind the camera. I mean, even in journalism, even in agents and managers and publicists, y'all don't know. I mean, I think it's important to have that inclusivity, just because it just needs to grow and evolve. And that's kind of what I enjoy about these pipeline programs, and just in general, talking to y'all, and what y'all are doing is amazing. But we are out of time. If y'all want to find out more info about the programs, you could go to WarnerMedia-Access.com, or is that a dash? I always get confused, and I'm a journalist, guys. I'm horrible. So it's or I want to say hyphen, WarnerMedia-Access.com. But yeah, Richard, Vinita, Hao, Grace, thank you so much for chatting. Y'all are wonderful. I look forward to seeing y'all's work. Thank you all for attending this LA Asian Pacific Film Festival panel, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the fest. Thank you all.